and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Antonina Antosha with UATV. Today, we're talking about promoting gender equality, reproductive health, youth empowerment in Ukraine. To achieve this goal, the United Nations Population Fund is working in Ukraine for more than 20 years. Its mission is to deliver a world where every pregnancy is wanted, every childbirth is safe, and every young person's potential is fulfilled. To talk more about this, we're joined in the studio today by Caspar Peek. He is a UNFPA Representative to Ukraine. Hello, and thank you for joining us.
Pleasure to be here.
So, as I have already mentioned, the United Nations Population Fund has been operating in Ukraine for 20 years now. You are being a part of it for 4 years now, living in Ukraine. Now, what are the main goals of the fund and how are they being achieved here in Ukraine?
Of course, our main purpose here is to help Ukraine become a more prosperous, happier nation. I think that's pretty the goal of all UN agencies in Ukraine, of course. So we work mostly on issues related to gender and gender-based violence, as you mentioned. So these are still tremendous challenges for Ukraine, as they are for many countries, of course. To get to true gender equality is a challenge.
How do we tackle gender-based violence?
Gender-based violence, unfortunately, there are about 1 million women in Ukraine, women and girls every year, who are victims of gender-based violence in some form or shape. And this,
are there formal shapes, or is it hard to tell what kind of a shape of a gender-based violence?
Some of this is unseen. A lot of it is unseen. The problem is, of course, not many women come forward, but it's also because there are many shapes. I mean, violence, you can argue, if a man tells his wife every day, you cannot get a job, or a mother's pension is taken away by her son, or she's being told every day, well, your food is really bad, or your hair looks horrible. That's a form of violence, isn't it? It's not just about
I thought
beating.
It was called gaslighting.
Well, it is, yes, absolutely. But it is a form of violence. It's a way of denigrating women, of diminishing their values, their dignity. We often think of it as, women being beaten up or worse, or being raped and what have you.
Yeah, psychological violence is also violence, right?
A lot.
It doesn't have to
be...
A
lot. And it affects women as much as physical violence, of course. This goes on for years sometimes. So we estimate there are easily 1 million women every year in Ukraine who are victims of violence.
Out of that 1 million victims, how many do actually come forward?
Very few. I mean...
Why? Are they scared?
There's a lot of this. A lot of people are scared. I think a lot of women do not know yet that there is support because, of course, we're working on legislative changes, on response mechanisms to make it possible to come forward. Very often there are practical reasons. What if the police come in? What if your husband ends up in jail? Who's going to provide for your family if the husband is the main breadwinner? So there are practical concerns. Then there are families who will say, don't do this, it's bad for the family, it brings dishonor. There are many, many reasons why women decide not to come forward.
What needs to be done to make women more willing to talk about the problem? Because unless we start talking about the problem, we're not going to get it solved.
That's right. I think you just mentioned it. Talking is the first step.
Just talking? So basically you work for women and with women?
Well, we work for all people, don't we? Unfortunately, gender-based violence affects women much more than men. So that's why, we are, of course, concerned about empowering women. But, of course, gender itself is not only about women. It's about equality in the end. It's about men realizing also that violence is not a way to communicate. And very often, this is the way we see we should communicate. Men are raised to think that only physical power or overpowering others is a way to establish your authority as a man. And it shouldn't. It doesn't have to be.
Intellect should be. All right. Men and women are not the only categories you work with, also kids, right? In particular, teenagers. Do you educate about sex health?
Of course we do, yes.
Do you have special programs?
There are programs, of course. We work with and through governments and NGOs as well to make this happen. And for us, it's important to see this in schools, for example. It's still something that's a challenge to get it in the school curricula in Ukraine.
In Ukraine?
Oh, yes. There are a couple of hours per year dedicated to sex education, for example. But often sex education is
awfully short.
Yes, there's a lot to be learned, isn't it? Yeah. So if not, kids end up learning it in the wrong places very often, and they don't get the right information.
In your opinion, which country suits this criteria the best, where the sex education is delivered to kids to the fullest?
Yeah, I mean, we often look at the Scandinavian countries, of course. I mean, I grew up in Holland myself, where we actually, and that's interesting, you know, when I was a child or a teenager, they didn't call it sex education, they called it relationship education. So you start very early, you start when you're 6. You start by realizing that you solve your problems by talking. And I think if you realize that, then that becomes part of your relationship as you grow up. It's with your friends, it's with your colleagues, it's with your sexual partner as well. You talk, you communicate, you figure out what you both want and do not want. So it creates a sense of equality and of partnership. So, you know, if you just focus on sex, we're saying people are sexual organs with bodies attached to it. That's not how it is, of course. We're human beings. Sex is part of our life. So we need to get that to young people as well, that it's a normal part of your life, but you must be knowledgeable about it, and you must be honest about it as well. So the whole idea is that get young people to realize what is good for them, what is it they want, what are their limits, what is it they don't want. Because very often we see that, especially young women, they give in to pressure.
Of saying no.
Yes, they give in to pressure because they're not able to negotiate. And young boys or young men are used to saying, you just push, because when a woman says no, she really means yes.
But later.
Exactly. So it's again about negotiation skills. It's a key thing. Get young people to learn how to negotiate what they want, not accept what's being offered to them.
How do we put this into the school curriculum in Ukraine?
Yeah, I mean, it's very hard because there is opposition. Whenever you say sex education, then there will be parents or other groups who say, oh, you want to teach all 12-year-olds to have sex. No, but we do know that many 15 and 16-year-olds have sex.
Are already having sex, that's right. Because the rate, I've looked at the numbers, and the average age for young girls in Ukraine to have first sex is 14 years old.
Oh, yes.
I think this is a disaster, but still.
Well, the point, yes, I mean, we can argue, is it too young? Yes, I mean, the point is this is a global phenomenon. Young people are having sex. On average, about 15 or so, they start having sex. It's not something, whether we like it or not, it's not something we're going to stop. Because it's just the way life is. The only thing we can do is make sure it's safe.
Right.
Make sure they're not forced to, there's no abuse, and it's completely safe without the wrong consequences. And there we're not doing so well. I mean, in Ukraine, we're seeing that easily between 25 and 30% of young people, teenagers, are saying that the last time they had sex, they did not use any protection. So obviously this is a problem.
And there we go, unwanted pregnancies and sickness.
STI, HIV, what have you.
Yeah.
So that is the problem. And they need good information. They need access to the means to protect themselves. You cannot outlaw sex for young people. It's very difficult.
Right, because if you're going to prohibit it, they're going to want it even more.
It's going to happen.
It's young people.
And there's nothing wrong with having sex. It's a natural human function. It's just, is it safe? Is it in the right conditions? And do they both agree to it or not? Which is a huge, huge question to be answered as well.
Okay. This year there will be a summit in which countries from all over the world are going to be taking place, and there's going to be the implementation of the action program adopted at the Cairo Conference on Population Development of 1994. How is Ukraine doing that? How is Ukraine fulfilling its obligations?
Yeah, Ukraine is doing very well on many points. Not so well on gender-based violence, which is part of it.
We've talked about it. What else? Which are the spheres that Ukraine needs to work more on?
There are some parts where Ukraine can do better. For example, there are still, I mean, of every 100,000 live births, babies who are born alive, there are about 24 mothers who die. So in Ukraine,
out of 100?
Out of 100,000.
Okay.
Doesn't sound like a lot. But I mean, by international comparison, that is high compared to Poland, which has 4, for example. So it's 6 times more than Poland, right? I mean, it's all relative. So the question is really, can you bring this down? In most European countries, that number is between 4 and 10, somewhere around there.
Is this because of the lack of the competence of the doctors?
No, I wouldn't say so. Doctors
What's the main
Ukraine
reason for such a death rate?
You see, if you look at it in absolute numbers, it is about 100 women. It's not a lot of women, but every woman counts. Every life is valuable. So why should these women die? It could be because, for example, in the eastern Ukraine, especially along the contact line, the medical facilities have been destroyed to a large extent. So we're providing additional services, but many women will go during their pregnancy without checkups. And as you know, of course, no checkups mean we don't see if you have anemia, high blood pressure, that can result in complications. So that accounts for it. Then there are those women who just don't go see doctors when they're pregnant. For example, women who are drug users. It's hard for them to see doctors. Many doctors refuse to see them in Ukraine. So if you're a drug user, you're pregnant, because there will be pregnant drug users. They will not see a doctor, which means the complication comes in when they're about to deliver, or they don't even go to a hospital when they're about to deliver, and then it's a problem. So a lot of those numbers account, a lot of these women account for that specific number. So it is looking what we call last mile issues. It's the quality issues. It's bringing everyone in, even those that we often don't think about. So that's one of the issues, for example. Then there is, for example, as I mentioned, young people, HIV is still a huge challenge. It is still the highest.
In Ukraine or internationally?
By European standards, Ukraine has the highest HIV prevalence rates. Right? It's about 1%. In most of Europe, it's way under 1%. So that's high. So there's a lot to be done there as well. And that is a challenge. It's mostly with young people. Again, because of
Is it because of the lack of the sexual education?
A lot of it is. And then there's, it all gets mixed with alcohol use.
And drugs.
Drugs. So, when you're doing this, you're not thinking about your safety very often. You just go ahead and have sex. And then there's not enough testing. Young people should all get tested. Everyone should get tested. If you think that, your sexual life is not the safest in the world, you should probably get tested. Testing is not universal, even though it's free. Young people don't know, they won't go, so then they don't get tested. And, if people don't get tested, we don't know. And there's no way you can treat people. Treatment is available as well, but if you're not tested, a lot of young people leave as well. As you know, a lot of young people leave Ukraine. Well, they go elsewhere. So, there is that risk as well, that continues. When you go to another country and you're a migrant, you're definitely not going to get tested, right? Because there's always a risk they will tell you, well, you better go home. So there's even an additional reason why young people will not get tested.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming here and bringing up such important and vital issues that need to be taken a closer look at. Thanks. That was Caspar Peek. He is a UNFPA representative to Ukraine. Thank you so much for watching UATV. Stay tuned for more.